Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. However you're watching, wherever you're watching, however you listen, wherever you listen. It's the Bet Online Salute Detroit podcast, and it's only 2/3 of the tripod today, but that's all right. Ryan's always with us in spirit, but we got the madman. The beard's growing in, folks. The beard's growing in. We need to Jamal, real quick. So I got the trial version of NCAA 25. I you know. Ooh. So I picked USC for my road to glory. The first year one, and I did like underdog, and they say like never do underdog. Like it's true, you will never play. Year one, this is just, I know it's computer animated, it's not real, but SC opened up 1-2. They lost in overtime to LSU, like 44-45 or something like that. They spanked Utah State. They got whooped by Michigan. They won the Big Ten championship. Believe it or not,
Okay.
This is year one. They beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. They lost in the first round of the playoffs to Texas A&M.
Wow.
And so I call BS on the loss to Texas A&M. I feel like SC could compete with Texas A&M, like
for sure, no question about it. It's interesting. I mean, Coach, I hope you're not foreshadowing here. You know, you're just sort of saying things.
So that will lead to, before I ask you that, and then the next year went undefeated and lost in the semifinal to Ohio State. So would you take those two concurrent years? Would you take those years?
Would I take that's a good question. Would I take those 2 years? Yeah, I would.
I would too. Those are pretty good years.
I would, because I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about 2 playoff appearances, and by next year, you're a Final Four team. I mean, I think I would take it.
With Miller Moss at the helm, and Miller Moss was the Heisman Trophy his redshirt senior year also.
There you go. Did Moss win the Heisman that second year for you?
The second year, yeah.
Yeah, he did. Okay, wonderful.
I was like, Lincoln.
Look at Coach. Okay.
It's all computer generated. I'm not saying that's going to happen. But with that being said, how are you doing? I just had to let you know that. But how are you doing?
No, I love it, Coach. Always great to see you. Of course, we miss Ryan. But, you know, you and I think will suffice today with a very fun conversation, as we always do.
So I didn't pull it up in time, but we'll just generally talk about it. The goose says hello, everybody. Lane Kiffin had a conversation today with our anarchist, I guess you could say.
Anarchist. Oh, I like the terminology. Okay.
Our anarchist, Paul Feinbaum, right? The supervillain Paul Feinbaum. And Lane Kiffin legit just sat down and asked him. He ran down all his stats of what he said, like, should have called for me. Thank you for getting me fired. Thank you for putting me in this opportunity. And pretty much ended it saying, what have you ever accomplished? What have you ever done? I might be paraphrasing, but we know what we're talking about here. And Paul Feinbaum sat with a poopy face and didn't have any response. And, well, you know, we were talking through the day, and that encouraged us to come up. Paul Feinbaum been controversial this whole week talking about Pac-12. No, I'm sorry, not Pac-12, Big Ten. I got to get used to saying Big Ten. Talking about a Big Ten team the whole week at SEC Media Day. Lane Kiffin kind of defended USC. I guess you would say he has roots, you know, in roots at USC. We'll say that. So today,
well, you know, Coach, what's interesting, just real quick before we segue. That was just an evisceration of Paul Feinbaum by Lane Kiffin. You could tell the Lane train, you know, sort of remembered, you know, the way, you know, kind of MJ remembers, the way Kobe remembers, you know, Lane remembered. And I think he really attributed his firing the night that he got tarmac to Paul Feinbaum, because Paul Feinbaum that night, a couple hours before, went on ESPN and talked about how Lane Kiffin, and I didn't even really understand this analogy at the time. I had to like look it up, where he called Lane Kiffin the Miley Cyrus of college football, and basically said that you know, he should be fired. And Kiffin remembered that very strongly, and you know, really sort of doubled down on that. Talked to Feinbaum about how, if you recall, Feinbaum basically predicted the demise of Nick Saban. That never happened. And so really sort of went into it. And, Coach, what's interesting, we've been talking about this now for a week in terms of Paul Feinbaum. I think the Lincoln Riley hatred, criticism, all of those things, the USC slant in terms of negativity, I think it all has started with Lane Kiffin. I think Lane Kiffin was that original target for Paul Feinbaum. And I actually had to look this up. I heard this from a third party, and I needed to verify it, and it started to make sense. Where did Paul Feinbaum graduate from school, Coach? Do you know?
Don't tell me he went to UCLA.
No, he went to Tennessee.
Oh,
and if you recall,
the late night
the lane train in the middle of the night leaving Tennessee to go to USC, I think it all started from that. And I think this sort of despise of USC, this despise of USC coaches for Paul Feinbaum, I think began that night and has carried over 15 years since. So that was sort of a full circle moment for me, Coach. But Paul Feinbaum, the Tennessee Volunteer, I think he is he's sticking to those guns there and holds a lot of resentment for Lane and now kind of the Lane successors. Very interesting there in terms of what happened. And just as a side note, Coach, it's fascinating that you call him kind of the supervillain, because Paul Feinbaum, if you dressed him up in all white or all black, like he could be a Bond villain. He kind of looks the part, So yeah. I think supervillain is a great term right there.
It's interesting, and like I don't know why he's upset with Lane. I don't know why Oklahoma fans are, which is weird. I didn't know Oklahoma was that way because Lincoln Riley says you can't pass up USC, and he was at Oklahoma, and it kind of makes me think, right? It's like there's certain jobs you can't pass up. When Lane was at Tennessee, if anything better came, you take it. At that time when Lane was at Tennessee, right? Like there's no doubt. It's unfortunate, and I remember when they hired Lane at USC, I was like, Coach Kiff wasn't like one of my favorite coaches, but like he was still one of my coaches. Like it's unfortunate that they hired him to take on water during probation, and then he comes off probation. He's trying his best to compete with a diminished roster, and he's getting beat on the road in Phoenix, and then he gets left on the tarmac. Like they wanted instant gratification. It wasn't a good idea. It wasn't fair or whatever, but the thing about Lincoln Riley, and I thought about this too, like he said, you can't pass up USC. Like you were at Oklahoma though. Like, how is SC a better job than Oklahoma? Nobody ever really stepped back and really thought about that comment. Like when SC called, I couldn't pass that up. Like, but dude, you're at Oklahoma. You're at one of the big logos. What's going on over there? That's a topic for a different day, but that's something to kind of think about.
And I think it triggered Feinbaum because just as Lincoln left another school for USC, the way Lane left his school for USC, I think that re-triggered a lot of things. Because we didn't hear a lot from Feinbaum with regards to Sark. And, truth be told, there was a lot of material there at the end. And then we didn't hear much from Feinbaum with Helton. And obviously, Helton was more irrelevant from a national perspective, so you can understand that. But it is interesting that the two guys where the perception is they kind of jilted schools in the middle of the night to go to USC. Those are the two targets of Feinbaum's criticism. We're starting to trace it back, Coach. I mean, if you want to lie down on the couch and we just turn this into a nice therapy session, we're game. I mean, Salute to Troy might turn into, Sofa to Troy, at this rate.
My one question is before we jump into our segment. Let's just say SC goes to the Final Four. What does Paul say?
Well, Coach, the article that I alluded to a couple days ago is up on LAFB.com now, LAFBnetwork.com, about Lincoln Riley. The 2023 version of Lincoln Riley is the 2011 version of LeBron James. College football's LeBron, and I think some of the tension gets alleviated if he makes it to the Final Four, but it'll depend on how the team performs. I think truly, in the eyes of the Paul Feinbaums of the world, I think Lincoln's got to bring home title number 12 to the Cardinal and Gold for it to kind of completely rest.
Which we are getting our title back, apparently. That's like in the works for us to get our title back from the Reggie Bush incident. Just to switch.
But I mean, that sure. But that, you're talking about like the BCS. I mean, but we're already regarded as, AP national champions in 03 and 04. So it's not going to affect the number of it's not going to affect the national title count.
Right. We still count it. We don't take anything. But yeah. Paul Feinbaum he got a taste of his own medicine. I think he just went back to his hotel room. Was like, he had to look in the mirror like, I better change what I say. I didn't expect that. I bet Lane was like, yeah, I'll take the last day with Paul on his network. I will have the very last interview. He was looking good too. He had the plaid.
The Lane train, baby. Yeah. The Lane train.
He had the plaid sports coat on. He had his hair done. I was like, all right, Lane.
I mean, in many ways, Lane is like the quintessential USC coach. Like he was supposed to be the successor to Pete in so many ways, in terms of just, the look, the aura, the ability to recruit, the personality. So perhaps in a different life, perhaps down the line, but wishing Lane nothing but the best here, Coach. Yeah. I think he's got a real chance. Folks may think this is a hot take. I think Lane has a real chance to win a national title here in the next 2 or 3 years. Also,
what if I told you Lane was very introverted when I was there?
It doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Big time introvert. Like, he only talks to the receivers. It's only people.
Yeah. Ash rode the cart, man, to take the coaches in at halftime, so he got to sit next to Lane quite a bit.
There you go. Good deal. Let's jump into our segment. That was a good little tangent there. So leaning on Paul Feinbaum, we wanted to bring up the 5 most controversial figures in USC history. So we put the little list together. Jamal has 5. I have 5. We'll go back and forth. We have not seen each other's lists. Some may match, some may not match. Maybe difference of opinions, but I think we know 2 for sure who may match. You're USC's historian, so I think we have 3 on our list that might match, but I don't know where they are on my list. I know where they are on my list. I don't know where they are on your list, but I think I have 2 that might be a little bit swayed different. So I'll let you kick it off. You start with your number 5. We'll talk about it. I'll go with my number 5. Go ahead. What do you got for your number 5? Yeah,
Coach. And so, obviously in honor of the Feinbaum, kind of controversy for USC, we said, wouldn't it be fun to talk about the 5 most controversial figures / players in USC football history? Coach, my number 5 is going to be Mike Williams. And,
that's a good
true great, receiver of the 21st century. When you talk about how great Mike Will was 2 years at USC, 02 and 03, 30 receiving touchdowns over those 2 years. Carson's favorite target, really the linchpin in many ways to Carson's Heisman run in 02. And then obviously backing that up with a sophomore performance, the national championship in 03, that famous, the Philly special. We talk about it all the time that it was really USC invented the Philly special. Yep. It was Mike Will with that lefty throw back to Leinart in that Rose Bowl against Michigan. What a decorated career Mike Will had. But the reason I have him as number 5 in terms of controversial figure, Coach, is him and Maurice Clarett decided to make that jump, right, 1 year prior to eligibility, right? With the NFL, you have to be 3 years removed from your high school class. Both Mike Will as well as Maurice Clarett were early. They wanted to challenge that rule, challenge the NCAA, and challenge kind of the NFL system. And ultimately, it didn't work out for either guy. That missing that 1 year was really significant. But what a story that was, Coach, in terms of kind of taking on an established rule for so many years. And I wonder, I go back and I wonder, had Mike Will come back to USC for a 3rd year and then declared, what does that career look like? When you talk about how big he was, how physical, the hands. I mean, it was almost sort of Julio Jones before Julio Jones in so many ways. He was such a physical freak. I wonder sometimes, a big what if. Could Mike Will, in my eyes, an all-pro, someone who would be regarded as one of the 3 to 5 best receivers in the NFL over a half decade to a full decade, what might have been? But Mike Will, my number 5. And, of course, Mike Will now back with the program. We're thrilled to see that. He was obviously there my freshman and sophomore year at USC, so soft place in my heart. But Mike Will is my number 5 for taking on the NCAA, Coach.
I think they should change that. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, because every time I say something, people only hear the first part that I say, because I got trash for saying, there was like, Texas made the playoff last year, and I definitely said, oh no, that was Oklahoma who won 5 games. They forgot that. They didn't listen to that part. So I take that back. I don't think they should change the rule because they should not, because those are grown men in the NFL. And that's different type of strength. That is grown man strength in the NFL. So the 3-year move is good. I think they should change the rule like they do with the NBA. You have up until the draft to decide if you're going to go. And if you don't get drafted, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where I get a little fuzzy with it. If you don't get drafted, I think you have the opportunity to go back, or it's like up into the draft. If you don't feel like you're going to get drafted, you could go back, something like that. But
yeah, there's
football needs to have that same rule.
Yeah, Coach, it's you have kind of a certain deadline to keep your name in the hat, but of course, it's hiring the agent essentially eliminates your amateur status. So you can kind of keep your name in the hat, but if you don't hire an agent, you have the opportunity to revert back. So. For sure. I think there's an opportunity there to kind of maybe bridge that gap a little bit in the NFL, to your point.
Well, definitely, because now everybody has an agent.
Right.
You got an agent early now, so you might as well have the rule.
Great point. Yep.
You know what I mean? So come on now, NCAA. My number 5, I'm going to go with this, also a receiver, but these are the latter years of the 90s. I'm going to go with Keyshawn Johnson.
Nice.
Right? And people are like, well, why do you say Keyshawn Johnson? Keyshawn Johnson was not a friendly person. He was not great in the media. If you ever try to get his autograph, like, he has a reputation of being a dick. Like, people do not really like Keyshawn Johnson. They like him in the NFL. He's better now that he's on TV, and I get it. He's doing to get a check. But, like, personally, like, personal-wise, like, if you know Keyshawn Johnson, what he did in the NFL and all the trouble he caused, he was not a very good staple. And like Pete Carroll used to say, a model citizen to society. So that on my list, number 5, I think Keyshawn Johnson is one of the controversial figures.
Love that one, Coach. I think that's a great one. I was contemplating Keyshawn. He was close, and sometimes you sort of have to define controversy and what elements of controversy that you sort of want to lean into. So, but I'm totally with you. Of course, everyone recalls his famous book, Just Give Me the Damn Ball. Remember when he made it to the NFL, which was so Keyshawn, right? It was always about Keyshawn. And so, yeah, I mean, a tough teammate at times, a tough, sort of tough with the media, tough with the fans, but at the end of the day, hey, he won a Rose Bowl with USC and then had the opportunity to win a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. I don't think he was quite the great wide receiver in the NFL that we all thought that would sort of justify the number 1 pick, but certainly a terrific career in the NFL, and love the pick there, Coach.
He's not a Hall of Famer, but he's definitely like a name to remember.
Yep.
You know
absolutely.
what I mean? Would you say he was a superstar?
I don't think so. I think he was a star, on some great, those Tampa teams were great.
The Giants, he was good with the Giants.
Yeah. The Jets. Yeah.
The Jets. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The Jets. Definitely. All right, go ahead. What's your number 4?
Coach, so I'm going to kind of go back a little bit, kind of historically here. Number 4 for me is Sam Bam Cunningham. And the reason for that is...
Oh, you're going positive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sam Bam Cunningham. And the reason for that really historic moment, Coach, you've made references to this in shows past over the last several months and years, frankly. But that moment, that seminal moment when USC went into Tuscaloosa, Alabama for the first time, with Paul Bear Bryant of Alabama did not believe in the integration of having black players on his roster. Sam Bam Cunningham at that time, USC star running back, really ran all over Alabama. USC won that game 42-21, and in many ways that was an inflection point of opening up integration from a college football perspective in the South. So certainly a controversial moment, but to your point, Coach, not in a negative way, in a very positive way of being able to really change the sport as well as society for the better. And I think it was probably a very controversial time and moment in the South, in Tuscaloosa, for SC to come in there. So for those reasons, Sam Bam Cunningham is my number 4 on this list.
I met Sam Bam. He was so happy I was wearing 39 when he first met me.
Oh, that's amazing.
Sam Bam, every game I see 39, man. I ain't seen nobody in 39 in a long time. Just to clarify your story, because I don't want him to kill us in the comments. Alabama didn't want to integrate. Bear Bryant did want to integrate.
Okay,
that's why he set the game up.
Gotcha. That's
came
correct.
out.
Yep.
Yeah, he came out and met Paul McKay and was like, "Hey, we need you to come down here and play us." And he didn't want to do it. And then Paul McKay was like, "All right, you guys got to come to us, and we'll go to you guys." And then He brought him in the locker
John
room
McKay
and John McKay.
Paul
John
Bear
McKay,
Bryant. Yeah, exactly. No, that was my bad, coach. It was administration. The university didn't want to, Paul Bear Bryant did. Yep.
And like the next year they had like 12 players on their team.
And,
I was like, oh, well, maybe you were right about something. So definitely. My number 4, I need to go see a shrink because I got all negatives. Now you're making me feel bad, but it is what it is. My number 4 is Pat Hayden. I think the reason why USC is in the way they are now is because of the decisions of Pat Hayden. And I guess this is more of an internal thing or a USC thing or like our classic thing, but like Pat Hayden let a lot of things go that mattered to the university. Let people get rid of the white shoestrings and all the traditional stuff that doesn't matter to the outside eye, but matters to purists of USC. He tried to stay in the Pete Carroll tree. He never really tried to buck the change. Right, the change was needed, but he wanted to stay. He wanted to keep that Pete Carroll thing alive, and it really didn't work. I did like the Sark hire. I'm a bigger Sark fan than Kiffin fan. I think Sark is a little bit better coach, but it's like, odds and ends and reasons why. But they're both good coaches. I'm not going to take anything, but I would pick Sark over Kiffin. But they just never let that go. I think Sark would have turned the corner, but issues happened. But Pat Hayden never really was like, you know what, it's time for a change. Program-wise, and he never made that program. And I think the program stayed at a low for such a long time, and now they're trying to make us an instant climb, and it's taking a long time to climb the mountain because of Pat Hayden.
Yeah, no, Coach, I think it's a really fair point. Obviously, what an interesting figure Pat Hayden is in terms of his life, right? He was quarterback of SC early to mid-70s, quarterback the national championship team, was the kind of the lefty quarterback legend, then had a wildly successful career in law and real estate, was a Rhodes Scholar, in fact. And then with my Garrett's, departure as USC athletic director, the university decided to go with Pat Hayden to kind of almost create sort of a certain image. And I think it was controversial from the get-go, Coach, in a very negative way. He was never a Kiffin guy. Kiffin was a Garrett hire. He was looking to get rid of Kiffin the moment he could. He kind of inherited the program in the crux of the sanctions, hired Sark. That didn't work out. And then, of course, I think he's very much regarded for the handling of Coach O. I mean, if you recall, after Sark, Coach O now goes 6-2 as interim
wins the
coach.
Rose Bowl.
It goes 6-2. Unfortunately, those 2 losses were to the 2 rivals in Notre Dame and UCLA, but he resurrected that run. The players loved him so much, and he decided to go in a different direction. And he essentially said, because he's not a country club guy, right? If you recall. So Pat Hayden just felt very much out of touch with what the players wanted, with who the folks were on the field. He felt very ivory tower. And then, of course, he was the athletic director during the Larry Scott era in the Pac-12, had an opportunity to kind of say and advocate from Pac-12 network perspective, which was such a dubious deal to begin with. So both from an on the field as well as from an off the field standpoint, Pat Hayden's certainly a very controversial figure. And like you and I talked about, Coach, I mean, SC has not been USC since 2008, and Pat Hayden is a significant reason as to why.
Yep, definitely. So no disagreement there. And I mean, you're SC. You could go in there like Texas used to do with the Big 12. This is what we're doing. This is how we're going to do it. Larry, shut up. You're just the face. This is our conference. Like, at the end of the day, sometimes you have to lay the hammer down, and he should have laid it down. Well, go on to number 3. Who's your number 3?
So, Coach, now it kind of gets interesting here, but for me, number 3 is El Presidente, Reggie Bush. It's hard to sort of have this list without the great Reggie Bush on it. Obviously, for my money, the most electric player in the history of college football, certainly the most electric player that I've ever seen live and in my lifetime. What an incredible career. Everything that we think about of USC in terms of greatness really over the last 40 plus years is attributed to that 03 to 05 period with Leinart and Bush. But of course, the controversy with the Heisman and the first and only individual to have his Heisman Trophy vacated which in today's terms with NIL for a non-issue. But back then, a lot of gray area, a lot of fuzz there in terms of, what was kind of taken in terms of sort of helping his family. So for all of those reasons, Coach, very, very controversial figure in USC history. I think it sort of accelerated the exit of Pete in many ways and sort of the distancing of Pete from the program for a number of years. And then, of course, it's just a very interesting relationship that Reggie now has with USC. Even though he's been reinstated, I think we expect the Utah State game, that home opener, to be kind of the unveiling of 2 Heisman Trophy jerseys, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to see the 13 and we want to see the 5 back in the peristyle. But I think a lot of damage has been done in terms of the relationship between Reggie and USC. There's a distance there. There's sort of a formality there. And hopefully over time it comes back. But for all of those reasons, much of which wasn't Reggie's fault. And some people say it was Reggie's fault. And, it's still kind of controversial to this day in so many ways. But I think the USC faithful believe, and rightfully so, that the Heisman belongs to Reggie Bush in 2005. It's great that it's back. It's great SC's got 8 of them. We never thought it was any other number besides that number. And it's great to have number 5 formally retired yet again. Nobody wore it since 05. We all knew what was up. But for all of those reasons, for how big a story it was, how unprecedented it was, Coach, I got Reggie at number 3.
So, I listened to Brady Quinn, LeVar Arrington in the morning driving into work. So Brady Quinn legit told a story this morning. It's crazy how things flow. His car was getting towed. He had to pay $150. The professor paid $150 for him. He goes to the football facility. Charlie Weiss tells him you're ineligible because the professor called compliance and said I paid for him. Brady Quinn was ineligible. He had to figure out how to pay $150 by the time practice started. Actually, 2 times he had to pay $300. There was a fine to it. There's a penalty to it. He had to pay $300 by the time practice started and donate it to a charity in order for him to become eligible, which I think is insane. With that being said, my number 3 is actually the same thing as Reggie Bush. From how I heard it happen, I think the investigation was shoddy. And I think that there were rules broken, but I think the rules weren't as what they made it seem on TV. It was legit a family friend. No agents were ever involved. It was a friendly friend. Mom was getting evicted out the house. Mom and stepdad was getting evicted out the apartment. He was like, hey, I show houses. I had this house. It hasn't been sold. You guys can rent it. They were legit paying rent. It was not a free house. That's the part that everybody skips over. That's the part that everybody doesn't ever look at. His parents were paying rent in that house. So how did those violations happen if his parents was paying rent in that house? That's the question that gets a little weird for me, but that's the story I heard. But just know Petros Papadakis broke more rules than anybody, because if you're on a recruiting visit at the time of Pete Carroll, you go visit his dad's restaurant, there was a couple of rules being broken. I'll just leave it at that. But neither here nor there. It caused a big controversy, put the school on probation. The 5's not in there. They're trying, I feel like they're trying to repair the relationship with Reggie Bush, and I feel like they're doing a better job. His Heisman presentation was in the what's the name of that club up there in the stadium? Is it the Victory
the Coliseum Club? Yep.
Yeah, the Coliseum Club. They did the presentation there. Hopefully he is at more games and they get him to come around a lot more. Same thing with Pete. And I've always been a big facilitator that, like, we need to get Pete back in somehow, some way. It's good to have people like that around your program. So Reggie, yeah, it was big news for a very long time. We're still talking about it to this day. I mean, if it was today's world, it's just like, oh, well, he got a house with his NIL deal. It's not a big deal, but it was a big deal back then. The second worst penalty handed down by the NCAA compared to SMU. So it was a big deal. Definitely. What is your number 3?
Well, Coach,
two. We're on
number 2. So this is where it gets interesting. But for me, number 2, Robo QB, Todd Marinovich. That's the late 80s. Just what an incredible figure he was in the late 80s to mid 90s. Just the whole story of, his father, ultimately training him as sort of almost this machine, this perfect quarterback, with the rigor and the discipline. that comes with almost like the military services. He had a police background and a military background. So it was sort of with that mindset that Marinovich became a high school legend here in Southern California, goes to USC, and then kind of gets the taste of freedom for the first time. And then all hell breaks loose, just in terms of all different kinds of vices. And then, of course, his famous back and forths coach in the late 80s with Larry Smith, the coach, and how Larry Smith, again, another control freak. It was very, very similar, where like his father was very controlling and then Larry Smith was very controlling. And all the famous stories of how Marinovich would kind of get into the huddle and change the play on purpose and kind of, do it. And the players loved all of that and drove Larry Smith crazy. And, you got the sense that Marinovich never really sort of even like peaked at USC, but he still won the Rose Bowl coach as a quarterback. And then, of course, had some challenges with substances and whatnot. And then, tried to revive, became, had that incredible opening with the Raiders. And it just didn't quite, pan out the way it could have. But just what a beautiful left-handed quarterback, the release, the arm, the throws, the mind, the vision. What could have been with Todd Marinovich. He's still here in Southern California. There was that incredible ESPN 30 for 30 on him many years ago. But just for all of the reasons, I mean, he felt like he was kind of USC football's Dennis Rodman, coach, and so for all of that, I've got Todd Marinovich as my number 2.
I'm going to hold off on the comments because I have Todd Marinovich on my list also, which I knew we were going to have this. I knew our top 3 was going to be the same. I just didn't know where. But my number 2 is a year ago, last summer, me and Candace did the top running backs in USC history. And this is the running back I put at number 1, Orenthal J. Simpson.
Yeah.
There's nobody more controversial than Orenthal J. Simpson, Bronco Chase, the hotel thing. Like when you think of USC and then all you think of all the scandals, the very first one that pops in your head, even before Reggie, is O.J. Simpson and what he said. Rumor is O.J. Simpson had a shady background anyway. He grew up in the rough part of San Francisco. I respect O.J. Simpson, RP. I respect O.J. Simpson as a running back. I respect O.J. Simpson as me growing up in kind of the same situation as O.J. South Central LA kid. O.J. grew up in the hood of San Francisco. He made it to Brentwood. In that aspect, and I used to tell my friends all that time, I wanted to be O.J. before the chase, right? He was in golfing at the Riviera. I still haven't golfed at the Riviera to this day. O.J. was able to walk into the Riviera. Hey, O.J., you golf at the Riviera? He was a well-known person. Everybody loved O.J. And just that lifestyle that you get to live in Brentwood. You get to build a home in Brentwood and be the man. Like, who doesn't want that, right? That's like every kid's dream from where he came from. But unfortunately, he had some run-ins. But I'm not jealous of his life after he got out of jail in Vegas, partying with younger co-eds, doing things like OJ was in the news for being OJ, and he never stopped being OJ. And so I that's the reason why like you can't leave out OJ. I'm pretty sure I know where OJ is on your list. But
well, Coach, yeah. It's the perfect segue because OJ is my number 1, right? Yeah. I mean, for all of the reasons that you laid out, I mean, just the trial of the century, right? I mean, right. It's unbelievable. I still remember, Coach, to this day. I mean, my mom watched every second of that trial. I mean, it was on every day, the whole day for like 6 months, 8 months. Yep. I can't even recall. I remember being in school the day of the verdict.
Me too.
And, they sort of can't I remember like back in the day, like you set up an assembly, you rolled out the television. I mean, it was a whole thing. I mean, it was absolutely unbelievable. The Dream Team, if you recall, with Johnny Cochran and Robert Shapiro and
Robert Kardashian.
Robert Kardashian. And I mean, that was sort of, I mean, in many ways, Coach, that was the birth of reality television, right? I mean, that was the moment that reality television was born with that low-speed chase. And, I mean, it was just an incredible, it just surreal, right? I mean, and you saw the chase. I mean, I saw the chase go down my neighborhood. I mean, because it was a chase all over the city. I mean, it was just unreal. And then obviously just the shock. I mean, and, the overwhelming DNA evidence of, what transpired. And then obviously it was a story of race. It was a story of class. It was a story of living a double life. I mean, it sort of just it captivated the entire country. I mean, it was absolutely a tragic ending to the two victims. Of course, that's first and foremost. But this guy went from truly an icon. I mean, you in terms of his USC career, in terms of with the Bills and the NFL career, he was on NBC. I mean, he was the guy doing the games as the sideline reporter, all those Hertz commercials, if you remember. I mean, He was like the most marketable guy. I mean, in many ways, Coach, O.J. Simpson was kind of Peyton Manning before Peyton Manning from an endorsement standpoint, with the NFL. And you sort of had this golden image. It was almost like an Obama-esque image that he had. Really, it was like Obama Denzelian image that he had, and then he went from that to as many of us sort of perceive to be this incredible murderer. I mean, how much more controversial can you get? I mean, the savage murderer, by all indications. And so that juxtaposition, I think, to this day is still wild. And I think it's, a lot of I have to say this, Coach, just to kind of keep it 100% real. I really wonder with the university, where that thought process was of taking down Reggie Bush's jersey, but not taking down OJ's jersey. Right. And I know one was related to kind of a direct NCAA, perceived violation, and the other was non-football related. But you just got to wonder, in terms of just a code of conduct, in terms of from a kind of an ethical perspective, a moral perspective, why that didn't happen. So for all those reasons, Coach, OJ, number one most controversial figure in USC football history for me.
I got to tell you a really good OJ story, actually. So freshman year, we're at practice in the middle of camp, like August, dog days of camp. And that time we had 2 days, and we actually had 3. We had practice, we had a walkthrough with no ball, and then we had another practice. So then we were doing 1-2-1s, but we were really doing 2-3-2s. But neither here nor there. It's over. They can't get us for it now. OJ walked on one day in the morning practice. We had our practices about 9. It was about 10 a.m. OJ walked on practice. Pete really didn't care because, Pete was welcoming everybody. It was OJ Simpson. I wouldn't care either. And then our DFO walked over to Pete, and Pete was like, kind of like, I don't care, he's here. And then I guess word got back to Heritage Hall, and then the DFO walked over to Pete again, and Pete was like, had a look like, well, you deal with it. So then security came, told OJ he had to leave. Wow. And OJ got loud and upset and pretty much said, I'm OJ effing Simpson. I built this place. Do you not know who I am? How can you kick me off of this? And Pete was trying to tell him it wasn't me. He was not happy about getting kicked off of campus. Wow. So that's definitely a big time OJ story. But have you ever heard the saying, the reason why OJ got off for 2 reasons? And do you know what those 2 reasons are? I heard this at SC. It's because he had money. He had money and he went to USC. They said if he would have went to UCLA, he would have been in jail.
That's I don't know about that one, Coach. To be honest with you, I think there were some other elements at play, the least of which had to do with where he went to school, but that's, it's sort of crazy that even in that type of a circumstance, there's a reference to the crosstown rivalry, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely. Like that's sort of that's crazy, right? But welcome to LA with these 2 schools, 10 miles apart.
It's so crazy. I know it doesn't. When we talk about us all the time, it's so crazy how underrated nationally the rivalry really is. You know what I mean? But we'll say that for the Victory Bell show later on in the year. My number 1 is your number 2, Tahj Marinovich. And the reason why I say that is because I know, we could split hairs between OJ and Tahj Marinovich, but Tahj Marinovich was the golden child. But what if I told you there's a lot of players like that, and there's a lot of players who end up the exact same way? There's 5 of them off my SC team, exact same way, ended up the exact same way as Tahj Marinovich. He never had a Big Mac or Oreo cookie until he went to college, right? And I mean, we both went to SC, and we both went down the road, and we both walked into some of them houses, and we both seen some crazy stuff And if you've never seen it before until you're a freshman in college with no rules, peer pressure is really, really, really strong to overcome if you never had to overcome it. And I mean, I don't know your background to an extent, but like, I'm pretty sure you've been in situations where you're like, nah, man, I'm good on that. Come on, no, I'm good. Like, you've been in a situation multiple times, and I've been in a situation multiple times before I got to college. He's never been in that situation until he gets to college, and it's like, here, eat this Big Mac. Here, try this. Here, try this. It's like, all right, cool. Like, I don't have to listen to anybody. Oh, man, I'm blowing up. And then you get college is still, and when I used to recruit, I used to tell parents this. College is your last chance of developing yourself before you get into the real world and becoming an adult. And as great as college is and as much freedom you have, there's no freedom like being an adult. You know what I mean? Like, but there's so many rules and you're not prepared by the time you get out of college. And he wasn't prepared, and he was given NFL money, which was still a lot of money at that time, even though you go look at his contract and people say he only got $500,000. Well, in the early 90s, that was a lot of money. You know what I mean? And you get that money and you get that freedom, and then now you're in an NFL scene, partying like with NFL people, doing NFL stuff, and you've never had the opportunity to like know what it does to you, or you've been sheltered your whole life. It's like those types of things. It's a sad story, and I've seen it so many times. That's why it's my number one. I've seen it so many times. Like, these parents want to put all their might into these kids and live through these kids to get a pro contract, but at the end of the day, it's not the parents' money. It's not the parents' happiness. It's the kids' happiness. And it hurts me. So, like, just the story of Tahj Marinovich, and I've heard about the story. You know what? That my parents used that as an example for me as I was coming up, being recruited and everything. They were like, I was able to go to parties. I was able to do a lot of things. And, like, my mom always told my dad, like, I don't want our kids to become Tahj Marinovich. They have to learn the world now while they're in a learning stage before they get to a point to where they can no longer learn the world, and it's way too late. So, like, it's heartbreaking. It's sad. Like, I think that's just the most he could have been a yellow jacket guy.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Like, he was so good.
Coach, if you look at Tahj Marinovich's skill set, he was Steve Young with a bigger arm.
Yeah.
He was sort of Steve Young with like a Marino release. It was kind of insane, so when you say he's totally a gold jacket guy, absolutely. And it's Coach, it's so well said that sometimes when, as parents, we want to sort of live through our children, because we want them to do the things that we never got to do. And so it comes from kind of a good place, but it sometimes gets wrapped around, in these interesting ways, and there's kind of an ego, and there's a control, and there's, it loses sort of its purity. And I've seen it so much, Coach, not necessarily with athletes, but just, being from kind of an Indian American family, and, there's that pressure, you got to go to med school, and, or you got to go be an engineer, or, and so parents are kind of putting that pressure on their children to kind of do this. And then the moment they sort of step out and get the freedom, it goes nonlinear very, very quickly. It's not even like, oh, I'm going to push back a little bit. The moment you get that taste of freedom, it goes nonlinear very, very quickly. And so it's a very sad history there for Tahj, because he what a talented guy. But it's sort of almost ironic, Coach, that his number was 12, because he was number one on my list, number one on your list, number two on my list, and so fitting that he was number 12. But it could have been there. And Coach, I hate to say this, but and I don't think and I don't wish this in any way, shape, or form, or even I'm predicting it, but I have to be honest. And Ryan and I have sort of talked about this offline a little bit as well. There's an element of Caleb in that regard, of sort of like this sort of structure, with the dad, and, this sort of unbelievable focus, where you hope that Caleb has had enough kind of freedom within that structure, where now that he's in the NFL, it doesn't get nonlinear. I don't think it was what Tahj Marinovich had to go through, but there is some ingredients of that with Caleb, and I think hopefully it was just the right amount to get him to be the number one pick and have a wildly successful career in the NFL. but just cautiously, you sometimes wonder.
I think it's a little. I think he had some freedom because you got to. Tom Marinovich couldn't go anywhere but USC or UCLA.
Right.
You know what I mean? His dad wouldn't let him leave the state. Like Caleb went from DC to Oklahoma, Oklahoma to California.
That's totally fair. Yep.
Yeah, so there's a little bit. I don't think it's that extreme, but there are. I will say this though, Caleb's dad is actually getting a lot of credit because of how he tried to negotiate Caleb Williams' contract. Right, he just got $39 million, and would he get 28 up front?
Mm-hmm.
So he got all his money up front. And when you think about it, when you propose it, like, just give us a big signing bonus, and then you help the team out because the rest of the $38 million won't hit the cap. You're paying me like $2 million a year to flex the rest of the money out. You could go get whoever you want to make my kid a better quarterback. Like, there's so many things. He tried to take the tag off and things like that. Like, so sometimes there is a best interest. Like, they try to put in no franchise tag. There is a best interest, but there is over the top that you do go through. And I do wish the best for Caleb. I really want Caleb to succeed. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. No question.
That's good. Well, that was our list. We put it together. I wonder what people think.
Yeah, no, I think this one could get very interesting. We talk about non-linear, Coach. The comments might get non-linear very quickly, but it was a very interesting conversation. Perfect for the offseason.
Yeah, no, and then I'm curious to see who we missed, right? Because we were like, me personally, I could have named a bunch of people that we don't know about this issues that happen. I'm not gonna do that. I wasn't gonna. Yeah. That was case of the fault. So, because there's a list of people you're like, what? No way. So yeah, definitely. I will say this, Jamal. I'm gonna bring it up on air real quick. Mount Rushmore, when we had the Aaron Donald conversation off air, I asked a lot of football people, and they didn't agree with you
about Aaron Donald being tied with LT for greatest defensive player of all time?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. We may need to open with that the next episode, Coach.
Yeah. We'll cliffhanger that one, but I asked a lot of my coaching friends. They even put Reggie White and Bruce Smith above Aaron Donald.
Okay.
And there's reasons why, and it makes sense. And one reason I will give, somebody said, name one person off that Giants team that LT won a Super Bowl with. And I was like, oh, damn. Like, LT won a Super Bowl on defense.
Two.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So, like, and I was like, wait, wasn't his quarterback Phil Simms? And he was like, well, I'm not sure. And it was like, even if it was Phil Simms, how good was Phil Simms really as a pro quarterback?
Well, it was Phil Simms. He was the primary quarterback during that period. But remember that the 91 against the Bills, Jeff Hostetler was the quarterback in the Super Bowl. So,
Exactly. So definitely, let's cliffhanger that. Let's hang that. Let's hold on to that, and we'll get.
Let's put a pin in it, Coach, as they say. Let's put a pin in it.
Or as our governor will say, let's table it for another session.
Yeah, let's take it offline, as you would say in business.
Yeah, in business, let's take it offline.
In a business meeting, Coach. Let's take that one offline.
Let's take that one off. Normally, when they say that means I'm wrong. I need to get my facts together. Let's have this conversation because I don't want to get embarrassed in this meeting.
When I'm prepared. Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. Yep. Or it's like I'm pissed off. Let me recoup because this meeting's gonna go left. But definitely, Jamal was a good one. It was a great one. It's so fun. How about we do it again on Monday? I think we should have that Mount Rushmore talk on Monday. I know it's.
Let's have the Mount Rushmore talk on Monday. Let's do it.
Definitely. Good deal. I appreciate you, Jamal. I appreciate all the fans. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. It's the Bet Online Salute Detroit podcast. You guys know how it goes. Live free. Fight on.